How many points did that add up to? Could he leave yet? There was no time to stop and calculate things. Knights kept pouring out of the gates non-stop. Even though Jin-Woo had taken down a bunch already, there were so many now that he couldn't even count them. The room was swarming with knights. Argorg, Jin-Woo growled, struggling to keep up. Suddenly, his HP plummeted, dropping dangerously low. HP 13610. 2070. He checked the timer. Only 5 minutes, and 8 seconds had passed. 5, 8. How much time? Jin-Woo knew he couldn't hold on much longer. Time to bail, he muttered under his breath. He was stuck in a tight spot, surrounded by knights with shining silver armor closing in on all sides. Desperate to escape, Jin-Woo squirmed like a trapped animal trying to reach the instant teleportation stone in his back pocket. But there were too many knights and he couldn't get his hand free. Just as he finally managed to grab the stone, it slipped from his sweaty palm. It clattered against the hard floor, bouncing off a knight's polished armor before rolling away out of reach. No, Jin-Woo groaned, diving forward to grab the stone, but the knights blocked him at every turn. Then more guys piled on him, and he couldn't catch his breath. He felt like he was being squished flat. Suddenly, a voice echoed in his head. Willpower activated. It happened again. Willpower activated. He started to feel dizzy, like everything was going dark. Bum, bum. The knights kept hitting him over and over. As he faded away, he could have sworn he heard someone laughing at him. This is all your fault, isn't it? A voice sneered. Why'd you wander off the path? Wasn't it amazing for an E-rank hunter to jump all the way to C, or even B rank? Plus one voice sneered. That's the best you could do. Another mocked. Shut up. Jin-Woo growled, his anger boiling over. You've only got yourself to blame, someone shot back. Shut up. Jin-Woo growled, his fist clenched in rage. Shut up. A powerful blast of energy exploded from him, sending the knights flying in all directions. Even though Jin-Woo was barely holding on to life, there was still a fire burning in his eyes, spark of defiance that refused to fade. His eyes were blazing with anger. It can't end like this. Peasant. He had been through so much to get this one chance. His whole life he'd been stuck at the very bottom of society, and now he longed to climb to the top. More than anyone else, he understood the struggles of the weak. Even though he'd fought to survive, scratching and clawing his way through life, all it had earned him were snickers and mocking words. What's the point of being an A rank? People would sneer. What was the association even thinking? They should have sent someone tough. Not. I bet he just cowered behind other hunters. He'd been given a chance to reach the place he'd always dreamed of. So how could he just sit back? No way. I remember now. He heard those voices in his mind again. Those voices so familiar, so full of mockery from people who had laughed behind his back rang in his ears. But he didn't care if they jeered or sneered. No matter how tough things got, he vowed to push through, even when it felt like every last bit of strength was fading. Whether he had 10 HP left, or just a sliver of life remaining, he wouldn't back down. This fight would go on until the very end, no matter what. Jin-Woo was ready to fight until he couldn't anymore. Hosh! He shouted, diving straight into the battle. Whack! His punch smashed into a knight's chest plate, sending it flying backward and knocking over the ones behind it too. The knights charged at him again, but Jin-Woo fought even harder. Bam! 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 No matter if they met his fist, elbow, knee or foot, every enemy crumpled like a paper doll. Your fatigue is over 70. Your movement will be limited. Jin-Woo slowed down as warned, but his eyes still blazed with determination. Some knights didn't go down after 1 or 2 hits and tried to keep fighting, so he struck them 3 or 4 more times to make sure they stayed down for good. Crack! Meanwhile, another countdown started ticking away. 8, 7, 6. Jin-Woo was swept away by the battle, so focused that he didn't notice anything else until the countdown hit single digits. His heart raced as a spark of hope flared. Could the quest finally be ending? But that hope was quickly crushed. The timer kept ticking away, and the countdown seemed to have nothing to do with the quest's end. As the numbers dropped 4, 3, 2, a chilling thought gripped him. Was this countdown marking the moments left until his death? It wasn't the first time something like this had happened, and he knew all too well how it felt to be racing against time for survival. The system had warned Jin-Woo that if he didn't become a player, he'd be dead in less than a second. Well, if that's how it was going to go down, Jin-Woo gritted his teeth fiercely. He was going to fight with every ounce of strength he had, until the very end. Crash. 2 more knights hit the ground. But even though Jin-Woo was determined, his body was in rough shape. He could barely stand straight anymore. Jin-Woo struggled to lift his arms to block the knight's attacks. One knight swung at him from the front, another from behind. A boom. The hits came from both sides, and Jin-Woo groaned under the force. "Arg!" he shouted as more knights closed in, like they didn't want to miss their chance. Surrounded on all sides, Jin-Woo couldn't even twitch a finger. Thud, 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 thud. The knights kept piling on, turning what felt like a wave of silver into a mountain. Jin-Woo's breath came in ragged gasps. Huff, cuss. The weight crushed him. It was like being suffocated alive. Jin-Woo's hand stuck out from a crowd of knights, reaching helplessly toward the sky. His health was dangerously low, only 93 out of 10, 2070. But he refused to give up, not yet. As his hand curled into a tight fist, a countdown appeared, revealing its result. 1 as a message flashed before him. "You have not completed the daily quest. 1. You will be transferred to the penalty zone." Jin-Woo blinked in disbelief. Penalty zone? What did that even mean? Before he could figure it out, everything around him began to shift, and he felt himself being pulled away. He skipped the daily quest on purpose, wanting to test his skills before diving into Demon's Castle dungeon. But things didn't go as planned. Rumble, rumble. The ground shook violently, just like what happened at the hospital. Then came strange hissing sounds. Plustras. Before Jin-Woo could react, the knights surrounding him began to dissolve one by one, crumbling into piles of sand. The world was changing in crazy ways, and Jin-Woo couldn't help but laugh at how weird it all was. For some reason, the system message he'd gotten before the quest started kept popping into his head. Good luck. Was the quest so tough that luck was all he could rely on? Or was the system pushing him to aim for a high score? Even if it felt like chance, well, whether it was luck or just a coincidence, one thing was clear. It was his chance to make something happen. But here's the key. How could Jin-Woo use this situation to his advantage? The ground started to rumble, and then shake harder. So Jin-Woo closed his eyes, and let the shaking move him around, rather than trying hard to stay steady. Don't let it get to you. Everything suddenly went quiet. Jin-Woo felt weightless, as if he were floating in mid-air. When he opened them again, he found himself right in the middle of a desert. He collapsed onto his knees, clutching the sand as he struggled to catch his breath. Ha, ha, ha. Each gasp was shaky, but the cool night air slowly filled his lungs and spread through him. "I can breathe," he sighed in relief. Jin-Woo flopped back, gazing up at the wide, starless black sky above. Jin-Woo gazed out at the endless pitch-black emptiness around him. It reminded him of the penalty zone from before, but he didn't have time to think about that right now. He had just barely escaped a super dangerous situation, and now he was in a place that wasn't much safer. Even though he knew he should probably get moving, Jin-Woo didn't feel like standing up. Instead, he stayed put and opened his stat window. Here's what it showed. Dentind 310, 27T, MPV 2020-85, Fatigue, Dentind 27T. Jin-Woo's exhaustion had hit an all-time high over 90 for the first time ever. Even lifting a finger felt like too much effort. His health was dropping, but he didn't care. Lowering his exhaustion was way more important. "Shop," a voice said with a ping. The word made 2 options pop up in front of him. Buy and sell. Jin-Woo used to think the menu was kind of basic, but right now it was exactly what he needed. He grabbed the strongest healing potion he could find, hoping it would fix his exhausted state. As soon as Jin-Woo finished buying the potion, something cool happened. A sleek glass bottle filled with super bright red liquid suddenly appeared in his open hand. He quickly pulled out the cork and tilted the bottle into his mouth. Gulp, gulp. The sweet, tangy liquid slid down his throat like a fiery river. Recovering fatigue. Recovering fatigue. Recovering fatigue. Jin-Woo could actually see his tiredness melting away. This must have been the strongest healing potion out there. He felt like a brand new person in seconds. The magic was happening right before his eyes, and it was awesome. That was weird. Jin-Woo's HP stayed exactly the same, 93 out of 10, 200. His MP was still 24 out of 852, but his fatigue had dropped to 0, which was a nice surprise. So why didn't the potion work? He got his answer as he licked the last drop from his lips. Upheing. A message popped up. Healing potions can't recover HP when it's below 10% of your total HP. Simple enough. It makes sense. His HP was too low. Healing magic has its limits. Just like everything else. A healer's level decides how much they can heal, and potions have their own restrictions too. There's only so much a healing potion can do. It's good to know these things because, if you rely too much on potions without understanding their limits, it could backfire someday. That's why real-world experience is so important. How did it go again? Well, remember this. What doesn't kill you really does make you stronger. And when it comes to surviving, experience is everything. Luckily Jin-Woo wasn't a rookie here. He'd already been through the penalty zone once before. It's about time. Right on cue, Jin-Woo felt something weird and squirmy moving under his feet. Without wasting a second, he pulled his legs up tight and sprang to his feet. Jin-Woo felt super light. Like he could float away. The potion had him buzzing with energy. He landed smoothly and turned around. Just as he thought. The spot where he'd been lying was now a gaping sinkhole. Before, falling into one of those would have terrified him. Imagining it meant certain death. But now, Jin-Woo stood there calmly, curious about the hole that had nearly been his end. The bottom of the pit started bubbling up like crazy. Eight! Suddenly, a towering column of sand blasted into the air, and a massive centipede exploded out of the pit. It was just as Jin-Woo had remembered it. The first time he'd seen one of these creatures he'd been terrified. But this time though, it felt like he was watching it all in slow motion. Jin-Woo's eyes locked onto the space above its head. There, he spotted the red letters clearly, Chi Poison-Toothed Giant Desert Centipede. Its name glowed in the same crimson color as Cerberus at the demon's castle. Suddenly, a message popped up. 2 penalty quest. Survive for the required time. Required time. 4 hours. Remaining time. 4,000. Jin-Woo felt a surge of excitement as he read the message. This was his chance. He still had time to act, since he hadn't used the instant teleportation stone to escape yet. As soon as this penalty quest ended, he'd probably be sent right back to where he started. But if the system counted the time he spent in the penalty zone toward his total survival time, he could earn a ton of advancement points. He wasn't totally sure how things would play out, but one thing was clear: the system seemed set up to help him out. And hey, that probably meant good stuff would come from all this. 4 whole hours, can you believe it? He'd been forced to grab the instant teleportation stone in under 10 minutes. But somehow, because of the penalty zone, he ended up with 4 extra hours for free. There was just one catch. Jin-Woo was stuck in this creepy place with just 100 HP left, no way to heal with potions. He had to take down those centipedes without getting hurt too much. Now he had a mission: level up before things got worse. Let's do this. As Jin-Woo grabbed Kasaka's Venom Fang and got ready. The timer was ticking. Remaining time, 3:59. As soon as the quest started, Jin-Woo darted forward before the centipede could even move. Jin-Woo zoomed in fast and jumped at the creature. With a powerful leap, he landed on one of its legs about halfway up. Then he started climbing while swinging his dagger. Kasaka's Venom Fang. Every stab made a shack sound. As green goo oozed out, the centipede let out a deafening screech and twisted in pain with each hit. Suddenly, Jin-Woo moved super fast dash. He raced up the squirming body in seconds. Finally, at the top, he grabbed his dagger with both hands and prepared for his strongest move. With a fierce cry, he unleashed Fatal Strike and plunged the blade deep into the centipede's head. The blade sliced through the centipede's head with a loud "X-Care." A message popped up. The level of skill Fatal Strike has increased. Jin-Woo pumped his fist in excitement. It had been way too long since he'd gotten any good news. The upgraded Fatal Strike dealt massive damage, and the centipede thrashed wildly, screeching "Scree." But Jin-Woo wasn't done yet. He dodged to its back where it was totally exposed and defenseless. With a swift motion, he stabbed his dagger deep into its flesh. Shunk. Heck gripped the handle tight and slid down its back like it was a slippery slide. Shunk. Heck's strength, over 20 combined with the force of falling from as high as a 5-story building, ripped the centipede's back wide open in an epic splash. Shunk, while landed smoothly on the ground. The centipede let out a deafening screech. Shunk. Its body spasmed violently before crashing into the dirt with a loud thud, sending sand flying everywhere. A notification pinged in his ear. You have defeated poison-toothed giant desert centipede. Jin-Woo waved the dust away and checked the timer. Remaining time, 3:5:42. That whole fight took him just 17 seconds. Less than 20 seconds to take down a massive centipede. Yeah, that was pretty awesome. This was a whole different story compared to his fight with Cerberus. Jin-Woo was way more powerful now, having leveled up a bunch of times since then, plus all the cool gear he had equipped. He's pretty sure he could take down those centipedes without losing any health. The real question was, would there be enough of these centipedes to help him level up? That's what he needed to focus on, if he wanted to succeed in this job change quest. Jin-Woo was in a tight spot. If he couldn't get his HP back, he was done for. But then more sand shot into the air with a hiss. Centipedes caught wind of their kin's blood and started closing in. Jin-Woo's face lit up as he saw them coming. He couldn't help but grin. Level up messages flashed 4 times. And after 4 hours of fighting, he reached level 50. The clock was ticking and Jin-Woo's penalty quest was almost over. His goal, survive for 4 hours. Now, only 3 minutes and 19 seconds remained. As he looked around, Jin-Woo saw the desert littered with the bodies of giant centipedes. Their corpses had helped him heal his HP, but there were no cool items or gold drops to grab. That made sense. Though this was a penalty zone. After all, it was time to get ready for the next step. Jin-Woo checked his shop balance and whistled. It was a whopping 3,115,629 gold. He had earned even more for my grace, racking up an extra 1,500,000 gold. With that kind of money, he could afford almost anything. And what did he buy? One super powerful weapon. Time to gear up. He'd spotted something that was just what he needed, a weapon perfect for taking down armored enemies. Meet the Fling Night Killer, a super sharp dagger designed to slice through even the toughest armor. Its sawtooth blade makes sure it doesn't bounce off, so you can land a solid hit every time. This dagger is no joke. It packs in rare attack power plus 75, and has a special buff called Evertil the Knight's Axe, which boosts your damage by 25% when fighting armored foes. It's basically built for battles against knights in shining armor.
The catch.
It costs a whopping number 800,000 golds, so you'll need to be prepared to spend big if you want this powerful weapon in your arsenal. Jin-Woo knew spending most of his savings was a big deal, but he didn't let the cost bother him. After all, what's gold worth if you're dead? He decided to go for it without hesitation. You have purchased Night Killer. You have purchased bandages. Along with Night Killer, Jin-Woo also picked up some bandages. He tightly wrapped them around his right hand along with a sword, whose sharp sawtooth blade looked pretty intimidating. Swish, fwish. As he swung it a few times, the weapon felt like a natural part of his body. At least I won't drop this thing, he thought to himself. For a moment he considered strapping Kasaka's venom fang to his left hand for extra protection, but then changed his mind. Having both hands tied up would have been super awkward, so Jin-Woo decided to keep one hand free. He stuffed the rest of the bandages into his inventory, and noticed something cool, the rune stone he got from my grease. Whoa! I totally forgot I had this. Jin-Woo exclaimed. The rune was called Ruler's Hand. If he crushed it, he could get a new skill. Since he needed all the help he could get, Jin-Woo smashed the stone without hesitation. You learn skill, Ruler's Hand. Awesome. This skill lets you move stuff without even touching it. And the best part, it doesn't cost any mana. Jin-Woo thought back to how Igrees had moved its sword from across the room. Now he could do something similar. He found a centipede corpse nearby to test his new power. Concentrating hard, he tried to move it, but nothing happened. The message said, object cannot be moved due to low proficiency. Seems like Jin-Woo needs to level up this skill before tackling heavier stuff. Undeterred, he decided to try something else. He dropped Kasaka's venom fang at his feet, and stretched out his hand, ready for another attempt. The dagger flew into his hand with a sharp tack. Upfollowing, he grabbed the hilt, eyes wide with amazement. This is going to be super useful, he muttered to himself. With the blade in hand he was ready to go. He lifted his head just in time to see the timer ticking down. Remaining time, 1004, at 3 seconds left. A message pinged in from the system. Bing. The penalty quest will end soon. Another message popped up right after. Bing. Because you tried hunting in the penalty zone. The next one will be even harder. He guessed they were making it tougher to make it feel more like a punishment. But would there even pen up Sam? Jin-Woo took a deep breath and refocused on his job change quest. Hundreds of monsters were waiting for him in the boss's lair. Maybe even more than before. In nicer terms, he was being sent back to the dungeon. But really, it felt more like he was being tossed into a den of hungry wolves. His HP, mana, fatigue level, items, skills and determination were all on his side. He was in a much better place than when he first stepped into this job change dungeon, but anxiety still gnawed at him. Thud thud thud. His heartbeat was so loud it almost felt like it was going to burst out of his chest. His palms were sweaty, and there was a knot in his stomach. This wasn't how he thought things would go. Jin-Woo squeezed his eyes shut, trying to keep his cool. Finally the familiar chime rang out. Ping. You have completed the penalty quest. He knew this was his last chance. Taking a deep breath, Jin-Woo opened his eyes again and froze. All the Silver Knights were slowly turning toward him, but they weren't what worried him most. His gaze sharpened as he scanned the area. Gotta take out the mages first. He had a simple reason for this plan, if I'm right. He hoped to test a theory he'd come up with, while stuck in the penalty zone. Before he could think any more, the knights charged. Their heavy armor shook the ground as they closed in. Thud, 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 thud. But Jin-Woo stayed calm. With quick reflexes, he leaped onto the shoulder of the lead knight and pushed off, soaring into the air. From where he stood, Jin-Woo could see the entire room.
Where are they?
He scanned the area, his eyes sharp. And then there, not too far away, he saw one of them.
A mage.
His heart raced as he realized he hadn't been imagining things after all. Earlier, when he'd pushed through the crowd of knights, he'd caught a glimpse of something strange through a small gap. Now it made sense. The mage was casting spells non-stop, their hands glowing with flashes of magic. There was nothing out of the ordinary about a mage using magic. But Jin-Woo couldn't shake the feeling that something felt really off. Have you ever noticed something that feels off? Like when everyone else thinks everything's normal, but your gut says otherwise. So here's the thing. Where was the magic? Sure, the knights were charging at Jin-Woo with their swords clashing and armor gleaming. But what about the mages? They were chanting, muttering spells under their breath. But nothing. No flashes of light, no explosions, no fireballs flying through the air. It was super weird. Well, almost nothing. There was one tiny exception, one little flicker of magic that caught Jin-Woo's eye. But that's a story for later. When one of them turned off their stealth skill with eyes of detection, the knights around him froze for a second. Jin-Woo first thought they stopped, because their target had vanished. But he figured out the truth later, while battling centipedes in the penalty zone. After defeating the 8th centipede, he pumped his fist like a champion when the level up message popped up. You have leveled up. His health was fully restored. His excitement didn't last long though, because he noticed something felt off. Leveling up is super easy in this area, so why couldn't he do it somewhere else? The system did warn him that he wouldn't recover HP after leveling up, but it never mentioned that he might not be able to level up at all. Looking back, Jin-Woo had managed to level up 5 times before starting the job change quest. But even though he fought for 6 whole minutes and beat nearly 100 knights afterward, he didn't gain a single level. That was super weird because usually defeating enemies gives you experience points. But wait, something didn't add up. The mages weren't casting spells, and the knights weren't giving him any XP. Jin-Woo's mind started racing as these two strange facts connected in his head. Could it be? A crazy thought popped into his head. What if the knights in the lair weren't real at all?